an anti-colorism advocate, and I'm an author of a book that aspires to, nip the issue of colorism in the bud called Unfair and Lovely. I am also a volunteer educator. I do that via an organization called eVidyaloka, which sets up digital classrooms in rural India. Um, in terms of my background itself, I am actually a software engineer. I had worked at several tech companies in the Silicon Valley, and I had founded a coding camps business called TechSmart Academy. But in recent years, I have dedicated my time towards social causes.
Hello and welcome to the Indian Diaspora Podcast. This is your host Rahul. Today's episode is something that goes to the core of Indian society. The problem or the issue of conscious or subconscious colorism, the color biases we might have as a group of people and civilization. And we're going to have a conversation with a social leader who passionately is working towards this cause. She is an educator, she is an author, and she's a social advocate that works to dispel the problem of colorism in the society. She works with something called the Colorism Project, and she has just launched a book called Unfair and Lovely. Mallika Thoppay, welcome to the Indian Diaspora Podcast.
Thank you so much, Rahul, for having me on the show. It's really a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. So, a little bit about myself, and I know you spoke a lot for me already.
Yep.
So, I am an anti-colorism advocate, and I'm an author of a book that aspires to nip the issue of colorism in the bud called Unfair and Lovely. I am also a volunteer educator. I do that via an organization called eVidyaloka, which sets up digital classrooms in rural India. In terms of my background itself, I am actually a software engineer. I had worked at several tech companies in the Silicon Valley, and I had founded a coding camps business called TechSmart Academy. But in recent years, I have dedicated my time towards social causes.
Got it. Thank you so much. Now, let's talk about this issue head on, fair and lovely. Rather, I'm going to begin from that. I remember growing up in India and seeing those advertisements about if you're fairer, you're going to find your husband. I've also read that people who quote unquote good look good, they find it easier to get jobs or move up the corporate hierarchy or what have you, right? So, what have you found and discovered on the conscious and subconscious issue of fairness and this penchant for skin color among humans, but also specifically in the Indian society? And why did you choose to fight for it?
So, as you mentioned, it's a rampant issue in our society. And I think we get a true sense of how serious an issue it is when we move out of the country. The thing is, in India itself, it is really not considered a problem. And the way I see it, that is a big problem. It is something wherein, a person is being held accountable for a certain physical trait of theirs that they really have no control over.
Hmm.
And being dark, obviously, as we all know, just has to do with, the amount of melanin in your skin. It says nothing about your abilities. It says nothing about, your status. I know there is some argument to that. There is traditionally people who spent more time in the sun and were laborers and so on, they tended to be darker. But as we know in this day and age, it should really be something that shouldn't hold you back from progressing whatsoever. But in spite of it, during my own upbringing, as well as, I grew up in India, and I found that for the most part, dark skin was looked down upon and fair skin was glorified. Um, and the more I sort of, experienced the world, I found that that is, such a silly thing that holds us back from progressing as a country, really. I mean, that's what it comes down to, because, what we feel about ourselves as individuals ultimately, speaks for the whole country, right? So I felt that that's something that is important for us to let go of. And in order to, obviously there are many movies that have been made, and there have been movements that have been taken on to combat colorism. But in terms of books that are, out there to address this particular topic, I found that there isn't very much, because, as an educator, I'm exposed to a lot of, children's literature. And I found that, there are books that entertain, there are books that exhibit moral values, and those are all great things. However, in terms of, the type of experiences children have, let's say on the playground or in the classroom, um, there's not very much that's out there. So, in order to sort of fill that void and, do a better thing for society, I decided to create Unfair.
You made me think there, Malika. There actually is no structured or unstructured education, I would say, in Indian society since the time we are growing up, that subconsciously or consciously makes you aware about, hey, you're not going to be biased, against color, right? In fact, I get reminded of those Bollywood songs I heard as a child. I'll just pick some of them. Gore rang pe na itna guman kar, gora rang do dil mein dhal jayega, right? Which means don't be too proud of your fairness, right? Bollywood songs is actually strewn with, I would say, unconscious validation of skin color, lest your uncles and aunties or your family that is reinforcing that subconsciously in conversations and in society, and that becomes the norm.
Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
there's no book, let alone people talking about it in a structured fashion, but there's certainly no book around it. Hmm.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where I always, think of how a dark child would feel when they, you know, watch an ad for Unfair and Lovely. I mean, sorry,
Yeah,
Fair and Lovely.
fair enough.
I
Yeah,
meant to say Fair and Lovely.
yeah,
How are they supposed to feel about themselves?
yeah,
Being made to feel inadequate because of something you can't even control and shouldn't have to change. I mean, that's just really wrong.
yeah.
And as you said, it's one thing where, as a parent, you try to do your best. You try to tell your child not to let these type of things get you down. But constantly, if you're reminded of it, like let's say you go to school, again, you're watching TV, it's all around you. And I think what we need to do is tackle this on every level. The book is just the beginning.
Hmm.
The book would be read by children, but then this needs to be sort of like a change to society on the whole.
Yeah,
It's just the beginning, is the way I see it.
yeah. Well said. Now, let's talk about the Colorism Project as well as an organization. Tell us more about it. Who started it, and what kind of projects this organization leads, and how can one be involved with them?
Sure. Yes. I'd be happy to talk about it. So it was founded by Dr. Donna Maria Culbreth, who's, an anti-colorism activist herself. We have hosted, and I'm, involved in it as well. I was the social media chair for last year's colorism conference.
Okay.
So we host conferences, annual conferences, wherein thought leaders from all over the world come in to host presentations against colorism, and just creating awareness about colorism, that type of thing. We publish a journal once a year, with information about what's going on in the world of anti colorist movements and things like that.
Hmm.
It's a great organization to be part of, because we're tackling this problem head on. And uh, for me, as part of what I realized was how global this problem is. It's not limited to India, unfortunately.
Hmm.
It is also prevalent in a large part of Asia and Africa. Pretty much, many countries that were colonized. So it's a change that needs to come about all over the world, and it proves a sort of a platform for getting everybody together, and we're all
Mm.
fighting the same thing.
Absolutely. You know,
Mhm.
you mentioned all those countries which were colonized, right? Which makes me think, Malika, was our attitude and outlook different before colonization? If I, let's say, go to, 4th century Gupta era India, or I go to, the courts of Tanjore in Tamil Nadu, or the Vijayanagara Empire in Karnataka, or even the Mughal Empire in the 13th century onwards, right? I do not know this. I wonder, has there been any anthropological studies done on the outlook of ancient civilizations, be it Ottoman empires or those in Africa or those in Asia before the European contact, on the attitudes towards skin color? I wonder.
Great question, and it's something that I've given thought to myself. Definitely, I know that colonialism is largely to blame for how colorism was perpetuated. However, personally, I'm of the thought that that is not the only. We can't just blame it all on
Hmm.
colonialism.
Hmm.
Part of the reason why I mention that is my own exposure to sort of the times you brought up in terms of
Hmm.
before colonization.
Hmm.
um, when you sort of like read stories during that time, and at least whatever's visually depicted, let's say in the form of comic books, right? If you pick up comic books, you'll see that the kings and pretty much everybody who was considered educated are
Hmm.
light skinned, whereas somebody who's untouchable, or a laborer, or someone who's poor, is
Yeah.
depicted with dark skin. Now, why is that? Why did we choose to do that? I don't think the
Hmm.
British told us to do that, right?
Hmm.
so, it makes me wonder. And the thing with something like that is, and it's interesting, the reason, and you'll be amazed at what drew my attention to this particular aspect of comic books. I was actually reading this to my son, and he very innocently asked me, and he was probably like 7 years old, and he asked me, he said, why are all the good people made to be fair, and why are all the bad
Interesting.
people made to be dark? He
Yeah.
actually said that. And I was like, I mean, I hadn't really noticed that, because that was something that I had absorbed. And the
Yeah.
way I see it is, if you're constantly exposed to literature, like you may be led to believe that somebody who looks fair is probably someone you can trust more. You know,
Yeah.
I can see that happening, right? Because you look a certain way, you sort of, think the opposite. So anyway, regardless, I think we in India itself, we had been colonized, and then they left, and there are many aspects of our society that they affected, and we decided to let go of all that. We decided to fight it, but I'm not sure why we're still holding on to colorism.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can't keep blaming the colonizers all our lives, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way I see it.
Lovely. I mean, you made me grow in your argument there, Malika. Uh, you know, there are various reasons in the past, right? But what matters today is
How we confront the
recognizing
future.
the
Exactly.
precisely
How we
right. It's
confront
it's
the future.
understanding what we read. So even the writers out here, people from the government, people, family heads, right? The head of the family, be it a mother or father. What are you doing consciously and subconsciously to reinforce the norms, the baggage that you inherited, irrespective of what happened? And you made me think when you said, Malika, that why are quote unquote the good guys always fair? And that's why I like representation, this word being used, right? Look at advertisements in the US. A lot of advertisements from big brands, they have non-whites, for example, right?
Exactly.
Or
I
movies
think
like Black Panther. Back to you.
absolutely. And I think also sort of, more in the recent years, they have people with all types of body types,
Right.
right? Because in the past, it was mostly really thin, people that were models, but then
Yeah.
now it sort of represents the general demographic,
Yeah.
right? Where so that way you can actually see yourself in those clothes,
Absolutely.
whereas you don't have to lose like 100 pounds just to fit into
Yeah.
them, kind of thing. Yeah,
Speaking of representation, Malika, Barbie just launched, an Indian doll
absolutely.
on Diwali, right? So
Yes, yes,
that is a
yes. It's
great
exciting. It's
progress.
exciting. And I think I see all of these as wonderful trends because I think, our future generations will actually get to play with dolls like that look like themselves and read books where the characters aren't, Caucasian. I mean,
Yeah.
I know growing up, I read Enid Blyton's, which were great
Yeah.
books. But,
Right.
I also grew up thinking that the good life exists in the West and that's how it
Mm.
needs to be. Whereas, I mean, that's not the case, right? So I think as Indians, it's our responsibility to create the
Mm.
type of literature that our kids will sort of want to embrace our own culture for and feel pride in it, and
I love
pride
that.
in their own skin and so on.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I always say this on Indian Diaspora Podcast: if we don't tell our stories, who will? Right?
absolutely,
So
absolutely,
representation and active ownership in creating ideas is our responsibility. Speaking of which,
absolutely.
we will transition into your book. So we understood the Colorism Project. Now
Yes.
let's understand Unfair and Lovely. Tease us with the content in the book. I understand there are two sisters, Sarah and I forget the name, the other, and it's
Close.
about their life experiences, right?
Sahana and
Talk to
Surabhi.
us.
Sahana and Surabhi.
Okay.
So basically, the book chronicles the journey of a middle school girl called Sahana.
All right.
Sahana and Surabhi, they move to a new school and start to make new friends, and they want to thrive, academically and socially. Sahana happens to be darker skinned than Surabhi. So, it sort of delves into their journeys because she faces a lot of obstacles due to her dark skin. And
Hmm.
the book is about how she overcomes those obstacles in the process. So, my sincere hope is that it teaches kids to be accepting, regardless of how people look and, their physical characteristics, and that it also teaches kids to stand up for themselves when they feel that something isn't going right. And before creating the book, I actually did a lot of research in terms of the type of sort of discrimination and exclusion that dark skinned people faced in India. I
Mm.
researched forums online, and sort of put all those thoughts together in creating this book. Yeah.
Could you show us the book for curious?
Absolutely. I happen to have a copy right here.
All right,
Here it
excellent.
is. This is
Unfair
Unfair
and
and
Lovely.
Lovely, and that is Sahana.
Right, I love the book cover. I love the book cover. And
Thank you. Thank
so,
you.
who's the audience for your book? Are they parents or children as well?
Oh, so it's interesting you ask. It's actually for 8 years and up, but I have actually had adults feel like it's a book that they can learn a lot from.
Okay,
So I would say 8 years to 100.
got it. Yeah,
Yes, and in terms of the illustration itself, it was Kavita Amarnath, an illustrator friend of mine, that created the illustrations, and I've also been told that the illustrations are just as good as the story.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, Kavita. Um, Now, coming back to your very own personal moment where your 7-year-old son asked mom, why are the good people, not dark, let's say, right? How was your response as a parent back then? And how did your son's understanding of the world, and I would say maturing towards this, happen over years in your reflection as a mother?
So I think at that time, it actually sort of left me dumbfounded, to be very honest.
Yeah.
It left me dumbfounded. And then I just, sort of explained to him that that's just the way certain comics are. And, they don't necessarily reflect, it don't, I just basically told him not to look too deeply into it. But then on, I decided sort of, to myself that it is really important for me to expose him to different kinds of literature so
Hmm.
that he sees good in dark
Hmm.
in general, you know.
Hmm.
So I try to get him to read books where the role models were, let's say, African Americans, or, watch
Mhm.
movies and so on. And I think it's kind of an easier task for those of us who live in the US,
Mhm.
because we're surrounded by people from different countries and, people of different skin tones and so on. It's not as easy in India. And the reason I say that is, as I had mentioned earlier, I'm also an educator with eVidyaloka. So
Hmm.
in our classroom, I was going through some flashcards. I think we were talking about nouns or something like that. And whenever there were sort of darker skinned people among the flashcards, I could tell my students were, giggling amongst themselves or sneering and things like that.
Hmm.
So I had to pause. I had to address it. I had to tell them that it's okay to be dark. It has nothing to do with, it's not something to be laughed at. It's not something to look down upon. So I use that as an opportunity to try do my bit to make them more compassionate, make
Hmm.
them more accepting of
Hmm.
different skin tones, and not to
Yeah.
exercise the same bias that's been going on for centuries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So, I heard that you exposed your son to different literature and, of course, your own personal experiences of educating students. A thought came to my mind, Malika. There is no better subconscious teacher than success. What do I mean? Let's take Europe, for example. So, I lived 5 years in Norway. In Europe, only the rich people can afford, a vacation down south in Spain during those gory winter days that you don't know in California.
Yes.
but a lot of Europeans really they want to tan. Now the rich echelons of the society, those who could tan, and once they come back, right, that's a status symbol, right? So it's interesting how culture, drives perception of beauty standards in a society.
Mm-hmm.
Y- you know,
Yes, yes,
so that's that segment of the world. Now, what does success mean in this context, right? It means what you exactly did for your son, right? Showing them literature where non-fair protagonists were heroes and heroines in the story, right? That is
absolutely.
success. It's just not material success, right? It's who's the hero of the story. It's
Yes,
on whom the story has been written, right? So,
yes,
so for all the creators watching this podcast, right? My reflection is that just like Malika, all of us have to create our own perspectives, narratives, because if we don't do it, who will?
yes,
But back to you.
absolutely.
That's a reflection from Europe on how tanning is a social standard out there, Malika.
Yes, yes, I can totally see that. And I think so. My main issue with colorism is, there has been some argument in terms of how, there are people that believe, like Indians who believe that they look better in pictures where they look fairer. So for me, I'm fine with that. That's fine. I mean, if you feel that way, you can do what you need to. The issue I have a problem with is when dark skin is looked down upon.
Hmm.
When dark skin, when people draw judgments based on dark skin.
Hmm.
That is the core issue here.
Understood. All right. Good point. Good point. And I think, when it becomes intergenerational, right? That's the real problem. I mean, it just becomes part of your core. And from our Bollywood songs and from ads that were run, um, it tells us that it became part of our core. Now, I want to shift gears and sort of ask a question about Gen Z and how societies are changing in India and abroad in the diaspora. So let me give a perspective. So in 70s, 1970s and 80s, it would have been okay to run the Fair and Lovely campaign in the 1990s as well. But now Fair and Lovely does not run this campaign in modern India, right? So in public sphere, we don't see this. Within our houses, some Indians might have this, I would like to believe, subconscious perception, right? But are you seeing this attitude still prevalent in newer generation, right? Which are educated, exposed, well-traveled, they know the world. Are you seeing this in among younger Indians and from of Gen Z and millennials watching this, right? What should they be aware about some subconscious biases that they have to remove?
Yes, great question. I would say it's definitely on the decline because there's so much, activism against colorism nowadays. It's long overdue, but it's finally happening.
Hmm.
And one of the instances where you see it is, especially when Netflix comes out with shows that are India based, where it's very obvious that colorism is being portrayed. It faces a lot of backlash on the internet. Where I know, like, for example, when Indian matchmaking came out, and, a lot of, I'm not sure if you've watched the show, but,
Yeah, I did.
desiring fair skin was very commonplace on that show,
Yes.
especially in the first season.
Right.
Whereas I know in the seasons that followed, they sort of addressed that. So definitely, I see that it's on the decline, which is good. There's still a lot of work to be done, though, because
Mm.
since I maintain a social media platform wherein I try to create awareness about colorism and any incidents that happen all over the world under this topic, I come across instances that luck. I mean, fortunately, it happens like sort of in more the rural and uneducated parts of India, wherein I hear of instances such as an 18-month-old girl who was killed. A little baby was killed because she was too dark and things like that. So, but then yes, I mean, for sure it appears that it's on the decline and we're slowly starting to let go of biases.
Good
Yeah.
answer. I mean, in India, there is still pockets of India where, we could be 100 years back. As much as I love that India and their culture, but again, you mentioned
Yes.
this example of that young girl.
Yes.
And
Yes.
of course,
Yes.
there
This
is
happened a
urban
few
India.
months ago.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So work is, the message is constant work is needed in this direction. Although there is, pockets of progress happening in certain strata of the society.
Absolutely. Yes.
Got it. Now we'll sort of move towards the future. I mean, your future, your mission for this cause. So you started with a book, uh, and you're working with the Colorism Project. What more do you want to do in this space to make a dent in the universe?
So I would definitely love to create more awareness and in terms of the book itself, as we all know that the new generation is absorbing more content through uh, videos and things like that, and Instagram Reels and TikTok and so on. So I sort of want to meet the audience where they are this time. So I think that creating content, a lot of visual content that conveys the same message is my goal, in sort of my short term goal. And in the long run, I would actually like to see my book off the shelves because I want I want to see a day when there is no need to read my book because the problem doesn't exist and it gets moved to historical fiction or something like that.
Yeah, well said. No, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, this is, they're saying this idea's time has arrived.
Hmm.
Your book's time, has arrived now because now now is the time that we as a society, our scope is Indian Americans, let's say, or Indian diaspora. We as a society should empower ourselves to tell the story, understand the story, and pass this learnings to our next generation so that there is no bias whatsoever. As you said, this book is not needed then, in the
Absolutely,
future.
because I know that we try to take on initiatives that tackle many different problems in India, right?
Hmm.
Education in rural areas, hunger, poverty, and so on. I
Hmm.
feel like this problem needs to, acquire the same amount of importance. It needs to be regarded in,
Yeah.
sort of the same realm because of what I mentioned, like the type of events that I mentioned to you, where it's actually, leading to it's a bigger problem than we think it is. Let me put it
Yeah.
that way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Now, Malika, if there is somebody watching this who really feels strongly about this and wants to contribute, how can they get involved with you or the Colorism Project?
First of all, I would say, don't practice colorism. And what that means is obviously, you're not going to say things that sound discriminatory or derogatory. But at the same time, I would say don't glorify fair skin,
Hmm.
because that indirectly sends the message that, being dark is not desirable. Beyond that, viewers can choose to follow me on Instagram. I share a lot of work that is being done to combat colorism, so they can choose to spread the word. They can read my book as well as other excellent books that are out there tackling colorism. So those are some, suggestions I have.
Got it. Excellent. So far we talked about importance of understanding this bias and what has been done by various groups like Colorism Group and yourself, and how to get involved. So let's move on in our conversation. Let's move to your journey from India to the Indian diaspora. So I understand you're based in California, and you are one of the many tech professionals who moved from India to the US. But something very interesting about you is that then you chose one more purpose in life. You started TechSmart Academy early on, but then you said, "Hey, let me choose something, an area that you're passionate about." I want to understand that journey of a professional, of a person, both from India to US. Understand your journey and understand your search for an ikigai or a goal or a purpose in life. Let's reflect more on this journey, Malika.
Sure, and I love that you use that word. So, when I was a software engineer, and this was, mainly before COVID, I would say I'd spend, weekends doing some, limited amount of philanthropic work. Um, During the pandemic, I saw how my kids struggled with remote learning, and I couldn't help but imagine how difficult it might be for students who reside in areas that have very limited access to resources,
Hmm.
rural India, for example.
Hmm.
And it so happened that a friend of mine recommended eVidyaloka to me, and told me to give it a shot. I wasn't really sure how all of that would pan out with time change differences and so on. But I decided to look it up and signed up as an educator. It's been 4 years now. I teach 5 days a week, and uh, Evidiloka is a very well run organization. So that made it smooth sailing for me. So that sort of got me into educating the rural areas and working on sort of the education front of social impact. And then further on, just working with them got me into writing some basic grammar books, and then slowly Unfair and Lovely came about. So in terms of why I chose that path over, staying in the tech industry itself, the way I see it is, staying in the tech industry would, potentially help the company thrive, with my contributions. Whereas I feel that with the opportunity I have, I'm able to impact someone's life in India and, you know, open up new opportunities for them. Knowledge of English could essentially teach you anything if you get on YouTube. So I feel that that impact is so much more far reaching, and the opportunity to be able to impact India on top of it is just icing on the cake, the way I see it. Because these opportunities I didn't even know they existed, and I just came upon it during the pandemic. So I just feel like it's far more impactful if I can change the lives of many students in my class, as opposed to making a company a lot of money. Then I mean, I think it would be it's pretty obvious what anybody would choose.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Malika, what's changed in you in this journey?
Let's see. I have become much more aware of what the type of struggles many people in different parts of the world are facing, And I've also become aware of uh, the what we have that we can easily change. For example, like I'll just mention, the use of technology, right?
Mhm.
Without phones, without digital classrooms, there's no way. I mean, the best I could probably do is write a check and support an organization like this.
Hmm.
Whereas now I can actually see the impact of what I'm trying to do, and
Hmm.
that encourages me to do more.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Which yeah, which is huge, because that's what keeps me going, and that's what keeps me wanting to do more, as well as recruit others who would
yeah.
want to do the same.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
the reason I asked this is, a lot of us professionals, we are in this, I would say, a rat race, or I would not use a derogatory term. I would say a race in life. Society told you to be an engineer, do your degrees, and then you're in this professional track. A lot of us do not get time to step back and reflect. There comes a
Yes.
time where you have to ask yourself, what are you passionate about? What the society needs from you, where you can make a difference. It might be a scary journey for many of us. And once
Yes.
they take that leap of faith, it's like, never swimming and then jumping into a pool. And then that first lap, how did it change you? Right? It's,
Yes.
it's, it's a very personal journey. And it's great to hear your words, Malika, on how you were impacted in this journey. Um,
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I mean, the thing is, this doesn't feel like a job to me, to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah,
Everything I do now, and I don't get tired of it. I don't want to walk away from it. I want to do more of it over the
yeah,
weekend. And I'm not really sure I felt that way about being in a corporate job.
yeah, yeah. Lovely. Well said. This is beautiful, right? Just feel alive and it becomes part of your fiber.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Um, y- y- are you connecting with other like-minded people beyond the US as well?
Absolutely, and that, through the Colorism Project, and the Colorism conference, there are individuals that join us. Obviously from India, from Africa, from the UK, from Canada. So it's a meeting of the minds. It
Yes.
happens in August. We
Okay.
just had our conference back in August.
Okay.
It's a 2-day virtual event.
Okay.
So, if anyone wishes to participate, they are welcome to. You just register, and, you can contribute, or you can just, be a part of the audience. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Now, do you work with brands here in the US or companies as part of that conference? Do they want to get involved in this initiative?
There have been, I wouldn't say we've gotten representation mainly from academia,
Got it.
because the organization itself was, founded by individuals in academia.
Okay.
So that's been the case so far. But on that note, though, I have seen initiatives being taken on in India itself by various companies
Hmm.
to combat this problem. I know Dove India ran a campaign recently wherein it was called Mothermonials. It was actually a
Mhm.
great campaign where it's kind of it was basically against using certain statistics to label a person who wants to get married, like a woman who wants to get married, such as height, weight, beauty, I mean, skin complexion, and so on. So it was women that came out and talked about how they were against that type of mindset, and
Hmm.
how we need to look beyond that. So it was a great, very successful campaign that ran. It was called Mothermonials.
Got it. Got it. If anyone from bigger companies or brands who's listening to this, if you want to get involved, I really urge you to reach out to Malika and her team. I think that could be a great collaboration to make a difference in the society. I think Malika, brands have power already through their financial means or advertisement channels to reach the hearts and minds of people, and they do that through the brands like the Dove campaign you mentioned. But here in India, here in Indian American diaspora and in USA, I think if any brand hears this, please reach out to Malika in the future.
Thanks, Rahul. I appreciate that.
Malika, there's one more question I thought about, which is Indian American diaspora and perhaps the youth in Indian American diaspora. Now, what's in my mind? Many Indian Americans might think that, hey, we are different than the Indian society, right? The first generation that they left, most of them educated, college degrees, right? The second generation that is born here, they might completely not feel Indian, but inherit a lot of subconscious biases, right?
Hmm.
And then there could be the third generation. Talk of Fiji and London, where a lot of third to fifth generation Indians are there, right? Now, my question to you is, among the newer Indian American generation, are you seeing this subconscious bias? And therefore, and how is that different than India? And what should be done to also address this segment of the society?
As I had mentioned earlier, I think the bias is definitely on the decline. But in terms of addressing it, if it still exists, I think content creators need to create more visual content in order to reach this type of audience, because that's where they're absorbing the content. And I feel that also empowering those victimized by colorism to speak out is key, because if they keep it within themselves, the issue is just going to perpetuate over generations. It's
Hmm,
never going to stop,
hmm,
you know? So, although it's not always easy, and this happens actually at the colorism conference, we do this. We have sessions where we have people who felt that they got the short end of the stick, they were victimized by colorism, to speak out about their experiences. So I think creating more forums like that
hmm.
would definitely bring attention to the fact that this is a serious problem
Yeah,
and that it's not okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Message taken there. Excellent.
Hmm.
So, Monica, at the end of this, is there anything else you would want to talk about your initiatives, which is eVidyaloka, you educate school children in India digitally, or the Colorism Project? Any other message that we forgot to give to the diaspora?
I just want to say that no matter where we are and who we are and how busy we are, we all have the ability to make small changes that make the world a better place. So I would urge everybody to take that step and do it today. Also, I think as part of that process, it's important for us to sort of look at the overall picture of things, be compassionate towards other people around us, be more accepting. Don't create judgments just based on physical attributes of individuals around you. And then if you are a parent, I would say expose your children to a diverse set of literature. So because I strongly believe that what we are exposed to as children heavily influences our attitudes towards many things as adults.
Hmm,
So if we fix the problem in the bud, it won't become a problem.
I love that. Yeah, fix the problem in the bud.
Absolutely.
Love your message. Okay. After this discussion, let's move to fun rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Are you ready, Malika?
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. So, your first question is a social change maker that you are very, very inspired by.
Okay, let's see. It would probably be Greta Thunberg.
Hmm. And why is
Yes.
that?
Um, in terms of what she has been able to achieve, despite being so young and despite, I guess, upsetting a lot of people.
Believe in your cause. Uh,
Absolutely.
hmm. All right. Second question. One thing you wished would change in your childhood around the topic of colorism.
Okay, so I can't change the books, I can't change the shows, but I think what would be nice is if adults around us recognized this problem early on and did not make the type of comments that I heard were spoken, glorifying fair skin or looking down upon dark skin. Because I feel like that is a problem that can be controlled because I can't, change whatever's printed or whatever the Bollywood directors choose to direct.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. Good point. Next question. One subconscious bias that we can take away tomorrow.
Would you say apart from colorism?
Um, I'll leave that. I'll leave that to you.
Okay. Well, I will, of course, be partial to colorism, and I'll say not tomorrow, but today, now.
Love that.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, Next, how do you find your purpose?
Well, sadly, there are enough problems in the world that that is not a difficult task.
Love. Oh, you made me. That was a very wise answer. A crisis and an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Pick your
Yes.
cause. Pick your cause.
Yes.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
sorry. I didn't hear the question. You said a crisis or an opportunity?
Sorry, I was reflecting. I loved your response.
Gotcha. Okay,
Sadly,
okay,
there are
okay.
enough
I thought that
problems
was
in the world. A
yes,
crisis.
yes. Turns into an
And
opportunity.
absolutely, absolutely. Made me think. All right. Finally, a movie that one should watch to break the colorism bias.
Okay, so that would be Bala with Ayushmann Khurrana in it. Great movie.
Oh, I've not watched it. What's it? It's
Yes, yes.
about?
I highly recommend it. It actually sort of tackles two problems, I would say. Ayushmann Khurrana is the hero in the movie, the actor, and so basically he faces a problem where he's losing hair, and then he's trying to woo this girl who happens to be fair skinned, and then he always, treated the darker skinned girl, badly, but then he realizes that. The darker skinned girl's actually, worth the time. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a great
cool.
movie.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know what I'm doing after my Thanksgiving. I'm watching this movie. Is it on Netflix, by the way, or I'm
Um, I watched it on Amazon Prime or Netflix, so
okay?
it's
All right,
definitely on one of the two.
all right.
Yeah.
Thanks for the tip.
Hmm.
Okay, all right. We'll bring this discussion home. Malika, thank you so much. You made us reflect on we Indians as a society, right? The baggage we are inheriting from the past, no matter what the reason, right? What matters is that what is in our circle of influence, what is in our control, right? What can we
Yes,
do about it? And even
absolutely.
more importantly, what is our responsibility as creators of our future, right? At
Absolutely.
our home and in the society.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And
absolutely.
everybody, please purchase Unfair and Lovely and educate your children, your family, and your society on this important topic.
I wanted to mention that it's on Amazon as well as on the Kindle, and it's on Kindle Unlimited. So folks who have that membership, they can actually read it for free.
Noted. All right, Malika, thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Rahul,
All
for
right.
the opportunity.
Bye. Okay. It was